This is my journey through pain, disillusionment, and the strength to rebuild my life at the age of 78. The deepest betrayals come from those we love. In that moment, the ground beneath me collapsed. Robert, my only son, remained silent, eyes lowered, as if the words Pamela had just spoken weighed heavily on his shoulders. My daughter-in-law stood in the house that still carried my name, with the windows I helped choose and the baseboards I cleaned every spring. When her voice cut through, "The air sharp as glass. Leave us alone. We need our space." I found the papers while cleaning James's desk, an old oak piece that still faintly smelled of camphor and old paper. Between overdue bills and forgotten notes were the divorce papers Robert had left behind after our Sunday lunch. My son hadn't mentioned the end of his marriage, but there it was, in cold, stamped letters, the silent unraveling of his world. I looked at my reflection in the antique mirror James gave me on our 40th anniversary. The glass was slightly tarnished with time, but still returned a sincere image. I noticed how the past year had deepened the lines around my eyes, not just signs of aging, but of sleepless nights, unspoken worries, and the growing absence of familiar voices in that large, quiet house. "Mom? Sorry I'm late," Robert said, rushing through the door of my Victorian home in Willow Creek. The floorboards creaked beneath his steps, as if they recognized someone who hadn't visited in days. At 50, his hair had thinned like James's in his later years, but his eyes still had that youthful spark from when he used to bring me school drawings, eager to show them off. "Work's been crazy today." "That's all right, dear. Lunch is still warm," I replied, hugging him. My hands rested on his back with familiar affection, hiding what I already knew. If he wanted to tell me, he would. I had learned over time not to force confidences. Over a chicken pot pie, his childhood favorite, passed down from my mother through gestures and whispered secrets in a tiny kitchen, Robert finally spoke. "Mom, Pamela and I have been together for a few months." I choked on my water. Pamela, Sarah's daughter. I remembered her blonde braids, tantrums at the playground, eyes that always seemed to demand more. "I know it seems sudden after the divorce, but we reconnected at a charity event last year." His eyes sparkled the way they used to in college, when he spoke of music or travel dreams. "It's different, Mom. She's changed." I remembered Pamela as a child, beautiful, but demanding, always, expecting the world to revolve around her. Sarah always excused her behavior. Now, at 45, Pamela had 2 failed marriages behind her and a history of impulsive choices. "If you're happy, I'm happy too," I said for the moment, because sometimes mothers speak the truth, but wait for the right time, and my time wasn't yet. 3 months later, they were engaged. 6 months later, I was hosting the engagement dinner in my own dining room, watching Pamela parade through the house in heels that echoed off the furniture, eyeing my antiques like auction pieces. "This chandelier must be worth a fortune," she said, her slender fingers pointing at the crystal fixture James had installed on a cold December morning. "It's not about the value," I replied, holding a glass of wine. "It's about the memories." After dinner, Robert pulled me aside. There was tension in his posture, as if each word was rehearsed. "Mom, we need to talk. We've been looking for apartments, but with the economy and my investments tanking?" He avoided my eyes, fidgeting with his college ring. "What is it, Robert?" "We're in financial trouble. I lost nearly everything in the tech crash." Before I could respond, Pamela appeared, wrapping her arm around Robert with a perfectly timed entrance. "Your mother doesn't need to worry about our problems." That night, I sat for hours on the porch, watching the distant lights of nearby homes. I decided to change everything. James and I owned several rental properties. The Colonial on Elm Street was empty, but well-maintained. The garden was still trimmed weekly, and the fireplace worked perfectly. The next day, I called Robert. "I have a solution to the housing issue. The Colonial on Elm Street. You and Pamela can stay there as long as needed." His voice faltered. Mom, we can't. I insist. The property's just sitting there. But I'll keep it in my name. It's part of my retirement plan. He went quiet. Deep down, I knew I was lifting a burden off his shoulders and opening my heart a little too wide. I handed them the keys to Elm Street. Pamela walked through the house, her perfectly manicured nail tracing the original wood of the staircase. It's outdated, she said with a thin smile, but we can work with it. Robert hugged me tightly, just a few seconds longer than usual. Thank you, Mom. We won't forget this. Back home, a strange weight pressed on my chest, a quiet premonition. I blamed it on empty nest feelings, though Robert had moved out decades ago. I never imagined I had just handed over the keys to what would become a prison of guilt, manipulation, and betrayal. It began with unanswered calls. I left messages for Robert, and days passed without reply. Sunday dinner invitations, a family tradition since he was in a high chair, were met with excuses. Work obligations, Pamela feeling unwell, last-minute changes. I kept a leather journal, a habit from my years as a principal. In it, I recorded everything, dates, times, details. Tuesday, called Robert about weekend dinner. Pamela answered, said they were busy. Thursday, left message, no response. Saturday, tried again, voicemail. One Wednesday afternoon, I made Robert's favorite chicken pot pie, seasoned just how he liked it, and drove to the house, technically, still mine. I rang the doorbell, holding the hot dish with my hands protected by crocheted mittens from my sister. Pamela answered, her smile faltering for just a second. Maggie, what a surprise. I thought you might enjoy some homemade food, I said, stepping inside. The house looked different. The old entry table with hand-carved legs was gone. In its place, a modern, glossy console, cold and sleek. Robert came out of the office, shirt wrinkled, eyes tired. Mom, we weren't expecting you. I was nearby and brought pie. My voice felt strained, but I smiled. How thoughtful, Pamela said, taking the dish with a fake smile. We just ordered delivery, but we'll save it for tomorrow. In the kitchen, I noticed more changes. Antique handles replaced with steel, cream walls now white. Everything felt less personal, more like Pamela. While Robert excused himself to finish an email, I overheard Pamela in the hallway whispering, I can't believe she showed up again. Can we ask her to call first? We have no privacy. The spoon in my teacup clinked against the porcelain. My hands trembled. Robert replied, muffled, She just wants to help. It's suffocating, Robert. Your mother needs to understand boundaries. I grabbed my purse and keys. By the time they returned, I was already at the door. I should go. Enjoy the pie. Mom, you don't have to leave, Robert said. But the relief in his voice was obvious, like a breeze slipping out without meaning to. Driving home, tears blurred my vision. The car radio played an old Ella Fitzgerald tune, but the lyrics felt distant. I agreed they needed space, but I never expected to be treated like an intruder in my own home, bringing food made with love. That night, the phone rang. Sarah, my friend of 5 decades. Maggie, how are you? We haven't spoken in weeks. I considered telling her what I heard, but my loyalty to Robert caught in my throat like a knot. I'm fine, just adjusting to Robert's marriage. Pamela's so happy, Sarah said. She thinks the house is perfect. I forgot she couldn't see me and nodded. Yes, it's a lovely house. In my journal, I wrote more firmly than usual. Reminder, they need space. Call before visiting. Spring turned into summer, and my relationship with Robert wilted like flowers forgotten in a dry vase. Weekly calls became monthly, and the silences between us grew longer, speaking louder than any conversation ever could. His visits, once punctual and full of promises, became rare and rushed, like appointments he just wanted to check off his list. One of the few times we had dinner together, what should have been a moment of reconnection turned into a showcase for Pamela. She dominated every part of the conversation, interrupting me with the ease of someone who doesn't value other people's silence. "I started volunteering at the literacy center," I commented, trying to share something that gave me purpose. "Speaking of which," Pamela cut me off before I finished. "Robert and I went to this amazing modern art exhibit over the weekend. You wouldn't like it, Maggie. It's way too avant-garde." Robert nodded, avoiding my gaze as if the conversation was about to turn uncomfortable, and he didn't want to take part or take sides. On Thanksgiving, I prepared everything as I always did. Polished James's silverware until it gleamed. Used the blue porcelain dishes with gold trims that I kept only for special occasions, and cooked Robert's favorite dishes: nutmeg mashed potatoes, green apple and sage-stuffed turkey, and the pumpkin pie James loved. They arrived an hour late. Pamela came in first, exuding expensive perfume and wearing a designer dress clearly over the top for a family dinner. Her eyes scanned every corner of the house with judgment, disguised as curiosity. "This place never changes," she said, running her perfectly manicured finger over the mahogany dresser. "Have you ever thought about modernizing it, Maggie? It looks like a museum." I forced a smile. "I find comfort in the familiar." During dinner, Pamela monopolized the conversation with stories about charity dinners, gallery openings, and people with double last names I had never heard of, and clearly never would. Every event she mentioned felt like a little jab. I wasn't invited, I wasn't remembered, I didn't belong to that world. When I served the pumpkin pie, my recipe carefully kept in a notebook stained from decades of use, Pamela dropped her fork with a dramatic gesture and stared at me. "Frankly, Maggie, a house this big for someone your age seems dangerous and, honestly, a waste." The silence was immediate. Even the ticking of the hallway clock seemed to pause. "I manage fine," I replied, my voice steady, though a lump formed in my throat. "There are lovely retirement communities in Concord," she continued, as if offering a solution to an obvious problem. "Very sophisticated, filled with people your age. I'm not ready yet." "No one's ready to admit they're getting old," she said, letting out a dry laugh, as if she'd made a witty joke. "But what are you going to do with all that old furniture?" "I always planned to pass it on to Robert," I said, looking at my son, who was hiding behind his slice of pie as if it could save him from the conversation. "We don't need to clutter our space with old stuff," Pamela dismissed with a wave of disdain. "It probably isn't worth much anyway." Robert cleared his throat, but stayed silent. He didn't defend the heirlooms he once admired, nor the mother who preserved them out of love and memory. After they left, I went to my bedroom. Opening the secret drawer where I always keep my grandmother's diamond necklace, I noticed it was gone. I had seen it that very morning while organizing my jewelry. I searched everywhere, trying to convince myself I'd put it somewhere else. But no. Deep down I knew. I just didn't want to believe it. In my diary, I wrote, "Diamond necklace gone. So is the son who would help me find it." My 79th birthday dawned clear, with soft light filtering through the living room curtains. I made coffee, checked my phone, hoping for a message from Robert. Nothing. No happy birthday, no emoji. At noon, kind calls came from friends, including Linda, but the phone stayed silent where it mattered most. My only son remained absent. He must be planning something special, I thought, clinging to the memory of years when Robert always found a way to surprise me, even after James passed. But the day went by, and nothing. Sadness threatened to take over, but determination spoke louder. I baked my own lemon cake with buttercream frosting, the same recipe James used, and put on my favorite blue dress, the one that always made me feel beautiful. I wouldn't let Robert's forgetfulness steal my day. I drove to Elm Street with the cake on the passenger seat, carefully covered with a linen cloth. As I turned the corner, I noticed cars parked along the street, lights on in every window, music flowing through the walls. I rang the doorbell, confused but hopeful. The laughter stopped. Robert opened the door, his face, once cheerful, crumbled when he saw me. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I froze, the cake heavier than ever in my hands. Behind him, a table decorated for a party. Champagne glasses sparkled under the chandelier. Gold balloons floated from the ceiling. "It's my birthday," I said, my voice small, almost inaudible. Pamela appeared, holding a glass of wine. "Maggie, what a surprise," she said, with a voice as sweet as it was fake. "It's your birthday? We didn't know." Through the doorway, I saw Sarah among the guests, her look mixing embarrassment and pity. "We're celebrating Robert's promotion," Pamela said, as if that explained everything. "If you'd called, we could have included you." Robert looked like a child in trouble. "Mom, I'm sorry. Work. I just forgot." I handed over the cake, forcing a smile that hurt. "It's nothing. Congratulations on the promotion." "Won't you come in?" he asked, but his voice betrayed that he hoped I would refuse. "No, I don't want to intrude." "Maybe another time then," Pamela said, already pushing the door with a polite smile. "Happy birthday, Maggie." I drove home, tears blurring the road. In the rear-view mirror, I saw an old woman, her face marked by disappointments, alone on her own birthday. James would be devastated. At home, I sat silently in the living room, no candles to blow out. My phone buzzed with a message from Robert. "Sorry about today, Mom. Dinner next week to celebrate? Love you." I didn't reply. In my diary, I wrote, "Today I turned 79, and I realized that in my son's new life, there's no room for his mother." 2 months dragged by, colder with each passing day. Following Pamela's imposed protocol, I called to schedule a visit. Robert needed some insurance documents. With every ring, the knot in my stomach tightened. "Maggie," Pamela answered, her voice icy. "Yes, tomorrow at 2 p.m. is fine." I arrived on time, as always. I brought the documents in a leather folder James gave me for our 30th anniversary. Upon arrival, I faced a disheartening scene. Construction trucks filled the garden I once cared for so tenderly. A dumpster crushed the lilies Robert and I planted when he was 6. I crossed the chaos to the door, which was ajar. Inside, the house's lobby, once elegant and full of history, was covered in plastic sheets and drywall dust. "Hello?" I called, stepping carefully. Robert appeared from the living room. He wore a freshly pressed dress shirt, completely out of place in the surrounding mess. "Mom, thanks for bringing the papers." "What's going on here?" I asked, trying to hide my unease. "Just some renovations," he replied evasively. "Pamela is in the back." I followed him, my heart heavy. The original hardwood floors James and I spent hours restoring were being covered with cold tiles. The old moldings I counted and cleaned one by one had disappeared, but it was the stained glass window that made me stop. 2 workers were removing the colored panels that had cast emerald, ruby, and sapphire lights over the room for more than a century, lights that danced on Robert's childhood walls. "Robert, what are you doing with the stained glass?" I barely managed to say. Pamela appeared, as always, center stage, this time wearing a hard hat as if it were a fashion accessory. "Maggie, perfect timing. What do you think of our modernization project?" I struggled to keep a neutral expression. "It's a big change. We're bringing this house into the 21st century," she said proudly. "These outdated stained glass windows are the first to go." "These windows are what made James and me fall in love with this house," I murmured, watching one of the panels carelessly leaned against the wall. "They're irreplaceable. The house is on the historic register because of them." Pamela's smile stiffened. "You said we could live here however we wanted." "I said you could live here," I corrected firmly. "Not destroy irreparable historic elements." A man in a suit approached. "Any problems?" "None," Pamela answered, quickly. "My mother-in-law is just surprised by the changes." "Actually," I said, straightening up, "I'd like to know if you obtained authorization to alter a historically protected property." The contractor frowned. Mrs. Thompson, I was told you approved everything. I approved nothing, I replied, looking at Robert, who busied himself examining his shoes. Pamela's face flushed. You gave us this house. I allowed you to live in it, I said slowly. The title remains in my name. Any structural changes require my formal approval. Enough, Pamela shouted, losing her composure. We always knew there were strings. Attached. That's why we never invited you. Leave us alone. We need our space. The contractor stepped back, uncomfortable. Finally, Robert looked me in the eyes. I think it's best if you go, Mom. We'll talk later. I handed over the documents and walked out. My legs were shaking, not from sadness, but from anger. A different kind of anger, clean, necessary. In the car, my hands trembled, and for the first time in a long while, it wasn't from fear or hurt. It was from clarity. This wasn't about the house or the stained glass windows. It was about respect, about self-worth, about boundaries. I started the engine. The decision was made. No more turning the other cheek. Maggie, you need to check your financial statements, Linda said, handing me a cup of tea in her sunny kitchen. The scent of chamomile hung in the air, but it brought no comfort. After leaving Robert and Pamela's house with a heavy chest and a whirlwind mind, I drove straight to Linda, my friend of 40 years, a retired lawyer, and one of the few people I still trusted. I told her everything. The growing distance with Robert, the disaster on my birthday, the confrontation about the renovations. Each word came out like a thorn being pulled. Linda listened with sharp eyes, the kind she used in court, calculating more than she let in. This isn't just rudeness, she finally said, setting her cup on the saucer. It's strategy. And those renovation costs you mentioned, they're sky high. Imported marble, custom cabinets. If they're having financial trouble like he claimed, where's that money coming from? The question lingered in the air, like a crack that starts small but widens over time. Unthinkable, but impossible to ignore. The next morning, I called Mr. Otto, my accountant since James passed. A methodical, trustworthy man who always spoke with surgical precision. His response was immediate and troubling. I've been trying to reach you for months, Mrs. Thompson. Guilt burned in my stomach. I'd been ignoring too much, living on autopilot. 2 hours later, in Otto's office, a cramped space filled with folders and the smell of old paper, he spread documents across the desk with steady fingers. We received alerts of unusual activity in your accounts, he said, pointing to several transactions highlighted in red. I sent notices to your home address. When I got no response, I assumed they were resolved with the banks. My heart began to race. I never received any notices. Otto frowned, worry deepening the lines in his face. That's what I feared. The discovery felt like a punch. Credit cards opened in my name, with frequent withdrawals, $200 here, $500 there, adding up to more than $65,000 in just 18 months. Look at the pattern, Otto said, pulling a calendar closer. Most of the withdrawals happen within 24 hours of visits from your son and Pamela. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's impossible. My voice came out weak, as if it didn't belong to me. There's more, he said, hesitating like someone holding a painful truth. I hired a private investigator. He found a property transfer document, with my signature, forged, meticulously, cruelly. I never signed this, I whispered, feeling my skin tingle. The copy was so well done that for a moment I even doubted myself. Otto stayed calm. He thought you should know, right away. That's when a memory hit me. 3 weeks earlier, Robert in my kitchen. Just insurance forms, Mom. Sign where I marked. I signed without looking. I was on the phone with Sarah. The distraction now felt unforgivable. What do I do now? My voice trembled. First, we protect your assets, Otto said. with the firmness of a captain in a storm. Then we document everything. And then you decide if you want to file criminal charges. Charges against my only son. It sounded like something from a tragic film, not my life. Otto continued. The investigator noticed something else. Your mail appears to have been tampered with frequently. I suggest redirecting all your financial correspondence to a P.O. box. Later, driving past Elm Street, I saw the construction trucks slowly demolishing the history of that place. And mine. Robert and Pamela were destroying, with the same zeal, everything I had protected. That night, I didn't write in my journal. Instead, I opened the safe and took out James's old pocket watch. Engraved on it, like a message time couldn't erase, courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. For the first time in many months, I slept without crying. 3 days after the meeting with Otto, I sat down with Richard, my broker. The market is strong right now, he explained. Properties in historic districts are in demand. I used my anger as fuel, waking the firmness of my 30 years as a school principal. I want a discreet sale, only serious buyers. Richard nodded, no questions asked. And the current occupants? My lawyer will handle the notices. Dr. Karen Miller was direct. As the legal owner with no registered lease, I only needed to notify them formally. There was no obligation to offer them first refusal. Why the decision to sell? Richard asked, perhaps curious, perhaps kind. Let's just say I'm simplifying my portfolio, I replied, a half-truth that hurt like a whole one. That same afternoon, I scheduled a bank appointment to open new accounts, and another with a watercolor teacher. At 79, why not try something new? The registered letter to Robert and Pamela was sent the next day. This letter serves as formal notification that the property on Elm Street may be listed for sale. I pictured Pamela's face when she received it. Instead of guilt or fear, I felt only a cold satisfaction. Meanwhile, the financial expert hired by Otto was documenting everything with precision, every transaction, every signature, every case of mail tampering. The pattern was undeniable and cruel. On Friday, I went to my first watercolor class at the community center. The room smelled of wet paper and paint. I dipped the brush in blue and made a crooked, hesitant line. Let the water have its own ideas, the instructor said. I thought about how, since James's death, I'd tried to control everything. My grief, my loneliness, my fear of being a burden. That night, Linda called. How are you holding up? I'm painting, I replied with a short laugh. Badly, but I'm painting. Maggie Thompson, artist. I like it, she said, smiling through the line. Any response to the letter? Not yet. Brace yourself. People like Pamela don't back down easily. The next day, Sarah called me, her voice tense. Pamela called me, furious, said you're selling the house without notice. That can't be true. It's my house, Sarah, I replied, calmly. They were notified yesterday. But they invested so much in the renovations. Unauthorized renovations, I corrected. Silence. Maggie, are you thinking clearly? Pamela says you've been confused lately. Ice ran down my spine. So that was the new tactic. Paint me as senile. I've never been clearer, I said firmly. Ask your daughter about the credit cards in my name, or the $65,000 that vanished from my accounts. More silence. I have to go, she said, and hung up. Hours later, I saw posts in family support forums. Worried about my elderly mother-in-law being manipulated by unscrupulous advisors. Sarah sent it to me with a short question. Is this what I think it is? It was Pamela, insinuating I was a confused old woman manipulated by others. On Thursday, Sarah showed up on my porch. We need to talk. I took her to the living room, where we had shared so many cups of tea in the past. This time, I offered nothing. Pamela and Robert met with a geriatric specialist, she said. They're considering having you evaluated for your ability to manage finances. I see, I replied. And what do you think about that? Sarah hesitated. I don't know what to think anymore. Pamela says you forget conversations, but now you seem so firm. Maybe because I am firm. Because I finally stopped letting myself be used. I opened the folder Otto had prepared. Financial fraud. Forgeries. Sarah flipped through the papers with trembling hands. I can't believe Pamela would do this. Neither could I at first, but the evidence was as clear as the paint spreading across my first watercolor. The next morning, Richard called. We have a potential buyer. They're only in town this weekend. I called Robert. A showing? We're in the middle of renovations. Unauthorized, I reminded him. The buyers will be there tomorrow at 11 a.m. This is ridiculous, he said. Pamela has a brunch planned. The notice will be delivered today. 2 months later, Richard brought me the offer. They're offering 15% above market value, but they want the house in 60 days. I accepted without hesitation. That night, the phone rang. It was Emily Carter, James's former assistant. I saw some posts online about your situation. I recognized Pamela's name. Emily told me that years ago Pamela had been investigated for financial misconduct involving an elderly client. James had offered pro bono help and kept a file. I have a copy, she said. The file arrived 2 days later. James's notes detailed 3 financial institutions, all with Pamela involved in investigations. In a note dated 2 months before his death, he had written, Sarah's friendship with Maggie complicates things. If Pamela ever gets involved with the family's finances, this file should be sent to the authorities. I called Karen immediately. This strengthens our case, she confirmed. That night, Sarah sent a message. We need to talk. Can I come by tomorrow? I replied, at 2. I organized 4 folders on the living room table. Fraud evidence, house documents, James's file and the sales contract, witnesses of betrayal, and of my strength. Sarah arrived. She wasn't alone. Robert and Pamela were with her. They were at my house when I texted you, Sarah explained. I thought it was better to resolve this together. The tension was thick, buzzing in the air. The wall clock struck 3 as sunlight cut through the room in sharp lines. Robert spoke first, cautiously. Mom, what's going on? His eyes scanned the room, landing on Sarah, then me. Sarah said you wanted to talk to us. I kept my tone calm. Actually, I said, placing my hands on the table, Sarah had something to tell me. Sarah squared, her shoulders like someone about to cross a fragile bridge. I did some digging after our last talk, she said plainly. I spoke with my cousin who works at the bank. I found inconsistencies, things that don't add up. Pamela crossed her arms, exhaling sharply. Mom, we've been over this, she cut in, eyes locked on me. Maggie's confused. You know she sometimes mixes up dates, passwords. Sarah didn't flinch. Her voice was steady. I also contacted some of your former employers, Pamela. Their silence was telling, and I found payment records from the family account covering certain indiscretions of yours. Pamela stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. This is ridiculous, she shouted, an outrageous invasion of my privacy. Sit down, I said, not raising my voice. No one's accused you of anything. Yet. I slowly opened the first folder and placed the documents on the table with precision. These are records of withdrawals totaling $65,000 from my personal accounts. All coincide with your visits, Pamela. On days you claimed you were just helping with paperwork. Robert turned pale. This can't be right. There must be some mistake. Without responding, I opened the second folder. Here's a transfer document with my forged signature. The same one you, Robert, asked me to sign as confirmation, remember? He leaned back as if struck by an invisible force. His eyes were fixed on the paper, unblinking. Then I opened the third folder. The weight of truth was heavy in my hands. James kept records. He documented a long, sad pattern of financial misconduct, Pamela. Elderly clients, co-workers. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Pamela lunged forward, trying to grab the papers. This is a lie. This proves nothing. Her voice was high-pitched, trembling, but Sarah was faster. With a firm motion, she grasped her daughter's arm. Stop, Pamela. Don't humiliate yourself further. She turned to me, eyes filled with tears. After our talk, I confirmed everything with her previous employers. My husband and we paid to cover her mistakes. We thought it would be the last time. We wanted to protect the family. Pamela turned to Sarah, her face twisted in anger. You had no right to touch Dad's accounts. That wasn't your money. Sarah met her gaze with pain and resolve. I had every right, she said, because I was trying to save what was left of our dignity. I took a deep breath and laid the final document on the table. The Colonial has been sold. The contract is here. The new owners move in 60 days. You can't do this, Pamela shrieked, losing control. We'll fight this. You've gone crazy, Maggie. With what evidence? I asked, looking her straight in the eye. The word of a woman with a history of financial abuse? Or my son, who somehow remodeled his whole kitchen on his salary and signed credit cards in my name? Silence. Robert stared at the documents like he wished they would disappear. I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know any of this. His voice held no conviction, only surrender. I looked at Pamela. For the first time, doubt crossed her face. Her eyebrows knit, lips tight. Arrogance was giving way to fear. Maybe you didn't know everything, I said, turning to Robert, but you knew enough. And you chose comfort over integrity. The old clock struck 4, the end of a play they had performed for years. Now what? Sarah asked quietly. I calmly closed the folders. Now. Everyone makes their choices. I've made mine. The legal agreement was simple. Pamela would face no criminal charges if she relinquished any claim to my assets, acknowledged the unauthorized use of my identity, returned the diamond necklace that belonged to my grandmother, and cut all contact with me and anyone in my family. No exceptions. No emails, no letters, no messages through third parties. It's generous, Karen, the attorney said, as she closed the folder with a precise click. I want to close this chapter, I replied, and for the first time, I meant it, not out of anger. That had long passed. But exhaustion. I didn't want to win. I wanted peace. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Robert moved into a small apartment on the east side of town. It wasn't what he was used to, but it had a big window and natural light. His divorce made the local paper, a discreet headline in the weekly edition, but nothing compared to the scandal it could have been if the accusations had gone public. Signed the agreement at the notary's office on a gray October day. As I walked out, a soft breeze touched my face, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Lightness. A strange relief. It wasn't happiness, but it was a beginning. That night, Sarah came over for dinner. I made pumpkin soup and fresh bread, our first attempt at normalcy since everything happened. She washed the dishes in silence, the sound of running water oddly comforting. Pamela's going to Arizona, she said, rinsing a bowl. My sister will take her in for a while until she gets back on her feet. Do you agree with that? I'm not sure, she sighed. Some days are harder. I keep asking myself how I missed the signs for so long. I wonder the same, I confessed, my gaze drifting to the window. Robert was my silent ache. Have you heard from him? I shook my head. He'll come, Sarah said with certainty. When he's ready to face what happened, just don't let your heart shut down before then. The next morning, Linda convinced me to attend a financial literacy group for seniors. I hesitated, but I went. It was held in a room at the public library, smelling of weak coffee and old carpet. I shared my story, not just about the fraud, but about the journey, from denial to clarity, from fear to resolve. "How did you find the courage to confront your son?" an older man with thick glasses asked. I realized that enabling his behavior wasn't love. Real love holds people accountable. Real love says enough when it has to. There was silence, then soft applause. We exchanged contacts, promised to stay in touch. For the first time, I felt I wasn't alone, that there was life beyond the wound. Later that afternoon, I heard footsteps on the porch. Robert. His face was worn, beard unshaven, eyes dark from sleepless nights. "Mom," he said, voice cracking. I let him in. He sat slowly on the couch, hands clasped between his knees. Like a boy about to confess something, I don't know where to start. Saying I'm sorry doesn't feel like enough. "It's not," I agreed without bitterness, "but it's a start." "I'm in therapy," he said, twice a week, trying to understand why I let things get so bad, why I didn't see what Pamela was doing, why I let it all destroy us. "And what have you learned?" "That I've spent my whole life looking for someone to care for me like you did. That I mistook control for love. And that in my fear of disappointing you, I ended up betraying everything you taught me." My eyes burned, but I kept my voice steady. "I forgive you, Robert," I said calmly. "But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. It's a process, and that process takes time." He nodded, a single tear rolling down. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I just couldn't let another day pass without telling you how sorry I am." We stood in silence for a moment. Then I got up and walked with him to the door. "We need time," I said, looking into his eyes. The garden was blooming with late summer roses, their delicate fragrance mixing with the smoky scent of burgers on the grill. The leaves had begun to change, painting the lawn in golden tones, as if nature itself were celebrating our new season. It was the first fundraising barbecue for Secure Seniors, our support group for the elderly. A simple event, but deeply symbolic. There, under string lights and between wooden tables adorned with lavender arrangements, we were celebrating something that had taken years to grow, a real refuge for the forgotten, the used, the discarded, by those who should have protected them. 3 years ago, it was just a support group, half a dozen trembling voices in a borrowed church room. Today, we were a regional organization active in 5 counties, with hotlines, legal and psychological aid, and a network of volunteers committed to restoring dignity to those who had already given so much to life. The barbecue would raise funds for our new one-on-one counseling program, with a special focus on victims of financial abuse within their own families, a painfully common and shamefully silenced issue. "Maggie, the press is here," Sarah came over, glowing with the enthusiasm of someone who still believed in the power of visibility. At 82, I moved slower. My knees complained on cold mornings, and my steps needed more time. But my mind had never felt more alive. I went to Thayer Porter, a young man with a gentle voice and attentive eyes. I told him how we started, how many seniors suffered in silence, and how it only took one person saying enough to give others the courage to speak up. "What would you say to a senior who's afraid to report abuse from their own family?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "I'd say real family honors your boundaries. They don't exploit them. And it's never too late to reclaim your dignity." As I spoke, my eyes wandered across the event. I saw Linda, now our treasurer, handing out forms with the confidence of someone who had rediscovered her purpose. I saw Otto, our legal volunteer, patiently explaining clauses to an elderly lady in a lilac beret. And Sarah, dear Sarah, channeling her guilt and pain into tireless work. She never said the words, but I knew. Helping others was how she had found a way to forgive herself. It was Linda who touched my shoulder, pointing subtly. "Maggie, look!" On the other side of the garden, standing near the white wooden fence, was Robert, my son. He hesitated, unsure if he was welcome. In his hands, something I recognized even from a distance, a weathered leather book. My heart skipped a beat. James's journal. I walked toward him with calm steps, steadying the swirl of emotions inside me. "I wasn't sure if I should come," he said, with a sheepish half-smile. "It's open to the public." I smiled. "I'm glad you came." We had rebuilt our relationship slowly, monthly lunches at first, then weekly calls, sometimes long, sometimes silent. Robert continued therapy, faced his choices, his vulnerability, around Pamela and the pain of admitting he had let his self-respect slip through his fingers out of fear of being alone. "I found this among Pamela's things," he said, handing me James's journal. "She took it from Dad's office. She was afraid of what he might have written." I opened it gently. Inside, between the pages, was a letter, sealed, with my name on it, James's handwriting. "I didn't read yours," Robert said, looking down. "But mine. He knew, Mom. He knew I'd lose myself, and he warned me to hold on to what I should never have let go of: integrity." The barbecue carried on in the background, accompanied by a jazz playlist and children's laughter. Friends and strangers shared garden chairs and old stories. The air tasted like a fresh start. "Want some lemonade?" I asked, nodding toward the drink table. Robert smiled, a little unsure, and followed me. Sarah saw us together and, without thinking, said he could join the planning committee for the next event. "That's a good idea," I said, looking at my son, and this time I truly meant it. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I sat alone on the patio with James's journal in my lap. The letter trembled in my hands, not from the wind, but from the weight of the story I knew I was about to hear. I opened the envelope carefully, breathing in the scent of aged paper. "My dearest Maggie." The handwriting was steady, just as it had always been. "If I could leave you and Robert with only one lesson, it would be this: honor what truly matters. Not the houses, not the investments, but the integrity with which you live, the truth with which you rise each morning." Tears blurred my glasses. It's never too late to begin again, to live your truth. He was right. It wasn't too late at 79 when I stood up for myself. And it wasn't too late now, at 82, helping others do the same. "Mom, need help with the last few tables?" Robert appeared beside me, no longer weighed down by the burden he'd carried for so long. I tucked the letter away and stood up, with him. Together we walked among the stacked chairs, gathering empty cups and forgotten napkins. The moon had risen in the sky, and the world, for a brief moment, felt at peace. I thought of the old colonial house, now lovingly restored by its new owners, of the stained glass windows, reinstalled with care, of Pamela, somewhere in a resort in Arizona, still chasing shortcuts to happiness. And I thought of the words I now carry as a mission, words I repeat to every elder who comes to us with a broken heart. Life is too long to carry resentment, and too short to waste on those who don't see your worth. It took me 82 years to learn that, but as James would say, better late than never. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, subscribe and share yours in the comments.